Boundaries are meant to be pushed, not to be lived in. Okay, take a second and just let that really sink in. How often do we trap ourselves inside these invisible walls simply because, well, no one ever taught us how to step outside of them? Today, we're going to explore a truly powerful plea about doing exactly that, absolutely shattering those boundaries. Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here because today's source material is, honestly, it's something special. We're diving into a famous convocation address delivered way back in 2005 by Subroto Bagchi. He's the founder and CEO of Mindtree. Now, he was speaking to a graduating class of teachers, but instead of giving your standard run-of-the-mill career advice, he laid out a profound, kind of hidden curriculum for life. This address is famously titled A Prayer to the Teacher, and it asks educators to impart the vital values and skills we all need to live a genuinely meaningful existence. And over the course of this explainer, we're going to uncover exactly what those are. Section 1, Beyond the Prescribed Syllabus. So Bagchi kicks things off by highlighting this massive gap between our standard prescribed syllabus and the actual vital life values we have to actively seek out for ourselves. Think about it. We clean our own houses meticulously, right? Why? Because our house is included in what we consider ours. But then we might turn right around and empty our garbage straight onto the road. And why do we do that? Because the road is not included in our super narrow definition of ownership. Bagchi points out this everyday hypocrisy to show how our textbooks completely fail to teach us the true value of inclusion. And that brings us to a really tough question that Bagchi challenges his audience with. He asks, is your neighbor's hunger included in your hunger? He uses this incredible example of feeding his own child, but completely neglecting to ask if the maid is eaten, or taking his kid out to the movies, but ignoring the neighbor's child. Our zone of care, it's often so incredibly small, isn't it? If we want to truly push boundaries, we've got to start by expanding exactly what and exactly who we include in our own lives. Section 2, Inclusion and Authentic Communication. Because expanding those boundaries fundamentally changes how we connect. We really have to look at the rat race. In this hyper-competitive environment we all live in, society tells us our survival depends entirely on the power to impress. We're told to speak to sound smart, to dominate to win. But Bakshi warns that the more we try to impress, the less we actually communicate. It's a huge trap. Instead, he begs the teacher to teach authentic communication. That's the ability to simply speak and write to convey true, genuine feelings. And listen, he doesn't just mean communicating with your boss or your coworkers. Let's slow down for a second and really absorb who Bagchi asks to communicate with. He asks to be taught how to connect with the sheer simplicity of a child, with the nakedness of a flower, with those who literally cannot speak or hear, with people less gifted and less privileged than us. He even asks to connect with those who came before us, those who will follow, and with things both animate and inanimate. The sheer unexpected breadth of this list, it's just breathtaking. It completely redefines what it actually means to be a good communicator. Moving on to Section 3, How to Learn and Question. Now, surviving the modern world takes way more than just one-time rote memorization. It requires learning to learn. Bagchi rightly points out that the facts we memorize today, they're going to become obsolete and fast. We'll constantly be forced to fend for ourselves and learn newer, much more difficult things on the fly. Therefore, the underlying process of learning itself is far more critical than whatever specific facts we happen to be memorizing right now. We need to learn newer ways to learn, and that's what transforms a tedious chore into a joyful, lifelong adaptation. So how do we actually learn to learn? Well, Bagchi lays out this fascinating logical cycle. It starts by completely rejecting blind obedience. Step 1, ask questions. Bagchi says if we just do as we're told, we're basically enslaved. But if we ask questions, we trigger step 2. We get answers. Armed with those answers, we reach step 3. We can explore how to establish a better order of things. And finally, step 4, be accountable. Because when we ask questions, we have to accept that we can be questioned too. And it's in that beautiful, accountable exchange that the real truth emerges. Section 4, Nature, Humility, and Silence. This ongoing search for truth naturally forces us to look beyond ourselves. Bagchi paints this incredibly stark picture of how our individual actions ripple outward into the natural world. Look at this contrast here. On one hand, you've got scavenging birds circling a polluted city skyline. On the other, the lost singing birds that used to perch right on the windowsill. He uses this imagery to explain the awesome, terrifying imbalances we cause. Our endless consumerism, our indiscriminate use of pesticides that kill off small creatures, the clearing of trees, all of it leads to an urban decay that will eventually engulf us. We have to stop and ask why the singing birds are leaving, and more importantly, how we can bring them back. It's a pretty sobering reality, honestly. The modern commercial world judges our personal success purely by our ability to consume, to buy, and to sell. We are increasingly trapped in this system that defines our entire worth by how much economic value we create. It's such a superficial metric, and it forces us to constantly extract from the world around us. But here is where we completely flip the script, and I absolutely love this part. Bagji points out that the things that truly sustain life on Earth, they never ask for a single penny in payment. I mean, think about it. The sea doesn't demand royalties for the catch of the day. The sun, the air, rivers, clouds, they don't send you an invoice for their services at the end of the month. The cow doesn't ask to be paid for her milk, and the Earth certainly doesn't charge money for the crops. This is literally the ultimate lesson in humility. The absolute greatest things in existence are entirely free. Recognizing this, though, requires us to step back from all that commercial chaos. We have to contrast the constant noise of the world with the power of silence. In a world where every single moment is flooded with notifications, ads, and just endless chatter, Banji prays to learn how to be quiet, to genuinely appreciate the sound of silence, because it is only in silence that we can actually contemplate the power within us. It takes real silence to realize we can make our point without ever having to raise our voice. But then he delivers this absolute powerhouse of a caveat. He says, "Teach me to raise my voice, teacher, when my silence can hurt another life." Wow! Silence is powerful for inner contemplation, for sure. But the very moment that silence makes us complicit in the suffering of others, the moment it hides the truth, we have an absolute obligation to break it. Section 5, Creating a Borderless World. And this brings us right to the climax of the address. We've expanded our view from the self, to our neighbors, to nature, and now to the entirety of the human race. Bakshi gets intensely passionate right here. He states flat out that poverty, disease, and hunger have no nationality. They do not respect borders. For hundreds of years, humanity has lived within these narrow domestic walls built on religious bigotry, racial intolerance, barbed wire, and smoking guns. But human suffering is a shared global issue that renders all those divisions totally irrelevant. He pleads for a future built on loving our fellow human beings, a future built on diversity, dialogue, and tolerance. Which leaves us with one final, striking thought. Bakshi actually asks the teacher to permanently remove the words foreign and foreigner from his vocabulary. He says, "This is my world. I do not want to be a foreigner to anyone, and I do not want to treat anyone like a foreigner." So I'll ask you, what foreign boundaries do you still hold in your own mind? Who or what are you still excluding from your zone of care? Take Bakshi's curriculum to heart, push those boundaries, and let's start living in a truly borderless world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.